Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out and finding the Duncan Rice Library. Some of you have known where it was. Maybe you all know where it was, but sometimes it's a bit labyrinthine to find your way through. So thank you for coming to the 4th annual Buchan lecture. That's right, isn't it, Nick? The 4th one?
Yeah. Possibly.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
Maybe 4.5. We're very pleased to have Amy Skillman from Goucher College in the USA coming to talk about some of the things that are very close to our hearts at the Elphinstone Institute. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Institute before we begin. Some of you will know this stuff. Some of you will never will know this stuff, but maybe haven't seen it in a cool-looking slide. So we'll see how it goes. Just a little sort of background about the Institute, which was founded in 1995 to celebrate the quincentenary, which is the 500th anniversary of the university. That's the only sentence in which I ever use the word quincentenary. Really to connect the university to its region. The university, in some ways, can be quite insular, and there's been a push over the last couple of decades in many universities to reach out and to be part of the communities in which they sit. And in our case, to co-produce the research and knowledge and projects and partner with local institutions, local groups, local people to create the work that we do. And we feed off each other, working through and with the community. So fundamentally, at the heart of it is something that I like to just summarize as tradition matters. Tradition makes a difference to people's lives. And what we mean by tradition is a complicated thing. And I'm not going to go about defining tradition, because others far greater than me with larger mustaches have defined tradition in many different ways. So at the Institute, we study ethnology, folklore, and ethnomusicology. In our work, we use ethnology and folklore essentially as synonyms, because European ethnology is what Americans talk about as folklore, as a discipline, as a way of approaching the materials. We research and promote the traditions and culture of Northeast Scotland, and that's broadly considered. So it's not just ancient ballads and songs and tunes, although it is that, but it's also Aberdeen hip-hop scene and doing schools workshops with local hip-hop artists. Community engagement is a very big part of what we do. Co-production, partnerships I mentioned. We have strategic programs around language and other aspects of tradition and culture that we're trying to revive or to be part of a sort of revival movement of. And we have a number of public events, of which this is one. Of course, you are the public. Why folklore and ethnology? Well, I always characterize folklore, when people ask what it is, as a way of making sense of the world. It's how people make sense of the world through narrative, which is not a folk tale like Cinderella necessarily. It can be, but it's also the stories we tell each other down the pub. You'll never guess what happened to me, or when I was 5, my father said this. So we always tell each other stories. That's actually how we communicate, is through stories. Skills, learning how to do stuff, as you see in that picture there. Building little model boats in Peterhead, an old tradition of model boat building where we arranged workshops for older folks to pass on to younger folks. There were 10 places on the workshop the first year we ran it, and 120 applicants. Wow. After some of the people in the area and down here saying, why would anybody be interested in that? 120 teenage kids wanted to take part, one of whom is here tonight. We just learned today. And community. Community is about doing stuff together regularly. It's about communicating with each other, telling each other stories, about being together, relying on each other, nippering, as they call it here in the Northeast, on the farms. So we explore culture and identity. We research tradition and creativity. People think of tradition as something static, but in fact, tradition is really, to my mind, process. It's the fact that we pass on things to each other and we have this interaction together. That's the traditional part. It almost doesn't matter what we're passing on. So in fact, I've come up with my own E equals MC squared, which is T times P equals F. Tradition times process equals folklore. So it's this, when you apply process to a thing, a bit of content, a song, a bit of music, or some story of some kind, and you do something with it, then that becomes folklore, living folklore. We do that by field work. There's Nicholas there, about to get burnt by the clavey in Burghead. And a couple of students from a few years ago, Talon and Maya, underdressed for the cold weather, actually. It was very cold that day. And Maya was from New Mexico, where she lives in a sort of desert area and was not used to this. So she was cold the whole year, but she enjoyed herself, I believe. She's still not friendly to us. We have a talk MLit in ethnology and folklore, and I would like each of you who has not signed up to sign up for that tonight, please, before you'll be allowed to go. This is the Clootie Well up in Malochy, outside Inverness, where people hang little clutes or cloths on May Day to take away ills or to bring a bit of good fortune upon themselves. And here's an interview on our field school up in the Isle of Lewis a couple of years ago with some local folks up there. So we look at creativity and community and social resilience. These are sort of three main research themes: language and the expressive arts, and knowing by doing. How you learn stuff by doing it alongside somebody or with somebody, rather than learning it from a book. There's that old Chinese proverb, to know something and not do is not to know. So you have to do stuff. You have to actually enact the stuff you know. Even if it's to yourself, or doing a wood carving by yourself or whatever, that's still enacting and reinforcing knowledge. We have embarked in the last few years on what we're calling the Northeast Culture Initiative, a very exciting name, and I'm sure you'll all agree. We're still looking for a more catchy name. But the idea is to take these themes of language and education, music, song and story, skills and crafts, tourism and traveler culture, build research around them, build projects around them, and promote as much as we can. Promote these things in wider aspects of society. Language and education, for example. A lot of folk here in the Northeast, 50%, 51%, according to the latest census, speak Scots or understand Scots in this part of Scotland. A very high density indeed. And yet, as soon as they walk into a doctor's office or a business office or anything to do with civic life or in the university, bang, it goes. And people do what they call up in Buchan as talking rather than speaking. And that's neither recht why. That's neither recht why a boot. You should be able to speak only why you like, forever you again, and still feel that it's part of your life and that the university is for you and you're not excluded from it because of the way you speak. So that's one of those barriers that we're trying to break down. So we're about renewal, about passing things on. This is a group of kids from Kenneller School. We did some workshops on traveller storytelling with them, and then they created little dramas and plays out of those stories and came and did them at the May Festival at the university here. We're about evolving traditions from the old Nipi lanterns to the slightly newer version of what goes on at Halloween. Inclusion, this is our traveller encampment on the green in the middle of the university. Historically, travellers have not felt like the university was part of their world, and vice versa. So we try working with the traveller community here to bring aspects of traveller life, the old, the bow tent, and the new, the caravan, right into the campus here, so people can come for the stories and stay for learning something about traveller culture and about the very difficult social conditions and racism that the traveller community faces. So we try to do some stealth education as well as part of all this. Negotiation. How does Dan Ralph, when he's burning the Clavey in Berg Head, get the Grampian police to stay away? How does he negotiate insurance for the whole thing? He doesn't. But there's all sorts of negotiation that goes on, not just him with authorities, but him within the community. So he's the leader of the Clavey crew, and he's a stickler for tradition, to use his own phrase. I'm a stickler for tradition, that's why they elected me king. And yet he's changed the tradition slightly within that to make it more traditional. So he's negotiating with himself, with tradition, with the community, to update or backdate some aspects of the tradition. So things are always changing. Culture is always changing. To think of it as static is a definite mistake, and certainly doesn't work that way. So we try to embrace that creativity that people bring to tradition and explore it. Sustenance, we try to support what goes on. Very tiny, it's not actually a fiddle, it's like a little ukulele, but it's the first thing you need to know is how to hold your hand like this. Anyway, some singing workshops that we do as well. community and social resilience. How can traditional skills like boat building or language or music and song be repurposed for today to bring communities together, bring aspects of community together, and to future-proof them in a way? Because when you have community, things work better. There's a project in Port Soy running at the moment, funded by Chevron, where young people come, people who don't quite fit in school, aren't getting the math and aren't sort of they aren't desk students. So they come along to this thing, they learn to build boats, and there are no straight lines in a boat at all. So you have to learn some serious geometry and some serious mathematics, really, to be able to build a boat. And so these kids apply themselves to that, and they learn side by side with others, with physical instruction by just imitating and by feel. You learn to feel if the wood is the right curve. So it's a very different way of learning. And this project came about when some local guys were having stones chucked at their windows by these teens who had nothing to do. So they've brought these teens into a totally different setting from the school, and they sort of get assigned from the school to this project. And a couple of them, one of them has started an electrical engineering firm of his own, another's gone on to college in Edinburgh and graduated very successfully. Others work in local businesses. So it really makes a difference to these people to educate through the means of these traditions, physical and mental exercises. Very important difference that can make in people's lives. So onwards to the David Buchan lecture. David Buchan was a folklorist from Aberdeen here, went to Aberdeen Grammar, and had a distinguished career across in North America mainly, although he taught at the University of Stirling for some years at a Scottish Studies program that he started there. But he was head of department in Newfoundland, Memorial University, and he started out actually at the University in Amherst in Massachusetts, where he did his dissertation on the ballad and the folk, which is about an extraordinary singer, Anna Brown, or Anna Gordon, who lived in Humanity Manse just down the high street here in the 18th century. And she provided a number of wonderful ballads from D-side to Walter Scott. And he published a few of them, and she was very annoyed by that because he didn't ask her permission. So we tend to ask people's permission before we publish things, having learned from Walter Scott's mistake. But at any rate, this is a pioneering study of oral tradition and how people remember songs, how people bring their creativity to bear and their memory on reproducing songs from their youth. She learned these songs up D-side from her youth. She was married to a professor here at the university, very capable, very literate, but also possessed of incredible, wonderfully complete sets of words for these ballads. And this reminds me of when Alan Lomax, the American song collector, came to Scotland. He said, "Nowhere have I found singers of oral songs who are very bookish, and also bookish people who know the most beautiful oral versions of songs." So the Scottish tradition of education did not get in the way of oral tradition. And to think of them as opposites and competing with each other is a definite mistake, because people have both. People are able to read, they're able to write, and they can have oral traditions as well. They're symbiotic, they're supportive, mutually supportive traditions, as David Atkinson says. So, we'll move on with today's Buchan lecture with Amy Skillman. And as I said at the beginning, this is a topic that's dear to our hearts because we are involved with the community and we want to some extent, be driven by what the community wants and needs, and so as not to impose our ideas of what we think Northeast culture is or what it should be used for. So if we can create projects in partnership with people rather than impose things, then I think we have, we're heading towards cultural sustainability, and I'm sure Amy will explain how it's really done. So, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, we have to switch to.
I have to switch to my.
That's yours. So it's that one.
That one?
Should be that one. Yep.
There we go. Okay. Well, thank you, Tom. I am going to talk to you today about a number of projects that I've been working on, and I could spend an hour or 4 talking about each one. So I'm actually going to read what I've written in order to stay within a reasonable time frame. So it's truly an honor to have been selected for this year's David Buchan Lecture. It's been a gift to be here with you. First, because I've always wanted to travel to my paternal grandmother's homeland. And second, to have had the opportunity to meet with so many students and who are doing such exciting work, and to hear about your work. It's been really fun. And I also have appreciated the opportunity to reflect on my work and put it into the context of this concept of community self-esteem. As my title suggests, this presentation is more about action than theory. I'm interested in how folklorists use their theoretical frameworks and skills to advocate for culture in a way that builds community well-being and self-esteem and works toward cultural equity on the planet. Now, before coming, I did a little research on David Buchan to know more about the man, and I actually identified a couple of other David Buchans that was really interesting. One is a sailing captain and explorer, and I discovered, I discovered at least 3 intriguing men by that name, but found very much in common with your David Buchan, the ballad scholar with eclectic and wide-ranging interests who understood the power of narrative and the benefit of an interdisciplinary approach to culture. As I hope my presentation will demonstrate, these are at the foundation of my work. So, thus, I'm going to begin with a couple of stories. My first job after graduate school was at the Craft and Folk Art Museum in Los Angeles, managing a project designed to identify master traditional artists in various Los Angeles neighborhoods and to bring them into the museum to display and demonstrate their work. This experience gave me the opportunity to do fieldwork in Los Angeles, where a growing Southeast Asian community, mostly Hmong, Vietnamese, and Cambodian, were trying to make a home for themselves after the Vietnam War. Now, as some of you know, I had been particularly impacted by the Vietnam War. I did not believe we should be there, and I demonstrated against it when I could. I wore a POW bracelet and watched with indescribable sorrow in April 1975 as our television stations broadcast the fall of Saigon. I was deeply moved by the fear and the chaos so clear on the faces of those being left behind as people were escaping. So it is no wonder that given the opportunity to conduct fieldwork in Los Angeles, I gravitated toward the Southeast Asian community. The first woman I interviewed was a Hmong refugee from Laos. Pa Yang was in her 40s and had very little English literacy at the time, so we conducted my interview through her daughter, as is often the case when working with refugees and immigrants. I will never forget walking up to her front door in the densely packed urban neighborhood and seeing the line of pairs of shoes on her front step. I removed mine, knocked, and was invited into her home, a long, simple row house. Oh, it works. There she sat in the light of the only window in the front room, working on an exquisite piece of reverse applique embroidery. As I talked with her through her daughter, I learned about the meaning of the symbols in the work, how these small, discrete objects of women's work embody the history and culture of her clan and an entire community recently displaced by war. The power of her artistic traditions to sustain and carry that culture across the world shaped my work for the next 40 years. That experience also shaped my future collaborations with museums. When we invited Pa Yang to show her work at the Craft and Folk Art Museum later that year, she did not come alone. Instead, she invited many of her friends who also do needlework to join her and to share the attention and the esteem that the event was providing to her. Together, they created a virtual crazy quilt of all the embroidery work on the walls, the tables, and just about every surface in the museum that was available to them. And in that very simple action, Pa Yang converted a moment of personal self-esteem into one that accrued to her entire community. In her book, Indigenous Methodologies, Margaret Kovach expands on the characteristics of qualitative research to propose a decolonizing methodology that encourages us to ensure a research design grounded in local epistemology, to see stories as methodology, and to plan our work with expectations of giving back to the community. When I think back to that experience with Payeng, I see very early lessons in honoring Hmong aesthetic sensibilities, in paying attention to local ways of knowing. I would have hung those embroidery pieces as individual works of art in nice, neat, straight lines, but she and her community preferred the collage effect with its visual pop and equitable attention to all the makers and their clan affiliations. I also see an early lesson in considering how my resources and research might give back by addressing larger issues in a community. I was singling out one person as master artist, a convention of the Western museum world, but that wasn't what was important to her. She sought recognition for her entire community. Several years later, I was invited to meet a Cambodian weaver who had recently settled in Pennsylvania. On my first visit to her home, she was barely noticeable in the room, sitting quietly in the shadows while we talked with her daughter. Bunem had been a master weaver in her native Cambodia, known throughout the region as the person to go to for beautiful silk fabrics used to make traditional and ritual dress. Her weaving held the community together, sustaining her culture and fostering well-being through cultural identity. Families traveled for miles to buy her weavings for their daughters' weddings. Yet in the United States, where her community was dispersed across a larger area and where they were focused on becoming American, she was little more than a shadow in the room. No longer did her community seek her out. They were buying Western bridal gowns and ordering silk from weavers in the refugee camps where their hard-earned dollars went much farther. On a visit to the State Museum with a church volunteer, she saw a loom and her eyes brightened. "I can do that," she told the volunteer. That volunteer saw an opportunity to make a difference. So with her own resources, she found a Swedish loom and encouraged Bunem to begin weaving. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Cambodian weaving, but Bunem tried really hard to weave on that particular loom, but it was nothing like the loom that she was used to, which is a 16-foot long loom that can manage, thousands of tiny silk threads that make up the dense, shimmering fabric. Over time, with connections, a little funding, and the support of the State Museum, we were able to have a loom made for her, and she put it in her basement, which was under the house in Cambodia, in the basement in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And she slowly began to weave again. Eventually, she started teaching weaving to younger Cambodian Americans. That recognition spread, and families started coming to her house again to purchase silk. Within 5 years, this shy woman received a National Heritage Award from the National Endowment for the Arts, the highest honor our nation gives to traditional artists. She came into full bloom on that stage during the award concert, charming even Charles Kuralt, a well-known journalist who was acting as the MC. As her daughter told me, her weaving made her feel alive, because she was finally contributing to her family's well-being again. This is the power of traditional arts. Experiences like these have led me to the project I want to talk about today. As the director of a graduate program in cultural sustainability, I am especially interested in this idea of community self-esteem and the connection between self-esteem and sustainability. I worry about how we define these terms, how we gain support for them, and how we measure them. However, I believe we cannot sustain our culture if the members of that culture lack a sense of belonging. Many have argued, Peter Block and Bell Hooks among them, that a sense of belonging is at the core of self-esteem. And fostering a sense of belonging is at the core of what folklorists do. As Payang demonstrated to me so long ago, community self-esteem begins with individual self-esteem. The project I want to share with you today took place over several years and is still ongoing. This is deeply engaging work that requires a commitment to the long haul. My organization at the time had pioneered 2 landmark conferences on refugee arts, creating opportunities for state arts councils and state refugee resettlement organizations across the country to interact for the first time and to find opportunities for collaboration. After so much work at the state and regional level, though, I was ready to focus some attention on my community. Since my earlier research had involved Southeast Asian artists, I decided to begin with refugee women artists, to begin with the familiar. I started asking around, and every time I turned a corner, someone mentioned Ho Tang Nguyen and the work she was doing with refugees. So I finally called her up and we set up a time for lunch. At the time, Ho Tang was the domestic violence liaison for the local YWCA. Her job was to connect refugee women to the services that the Y provided. Through her, I was hoping to find a connection to artists within the community and to help those artists apply to our state arts apprenticeship grant program. I believed that nurturing a practice of traditional arts might provide an avenue for expression and perhaps recovery and healing for these women. This belief was partially fueled by a potent statement from an Ethiopian traditional artist, Tesfaye Tessema, who said, "What people must understand is that this art is not just decoration. It forms and shapes the human being. If you can come from a country where children are starving to death, then you come to this country, which is so rich, you simply cannot explain why children are shooting each other. The reason must be that they don't have their culture. Your culture makes you think like a human being." So I was hoping to use the resources of our grant funding programs to support individual artists. Ho Tang was looking for ways to create leadership opportunities for women struggling with resettlement and all its domestic issues. It was not difficult for me to find common ground with this mission. What Ho Tang understood intuitively, and Elaine Lawless has demonstrated for us through her work with domestic violence shelters in Missouri, is that standard service programs for victims of domestic violence are not enough. In fact, in some cases, they are self-perpetuating. This is more true when domestic violence happens in immigrant and refugee families. Language barriers, fear of deportation, and lack of understanding about what constitutes domestic violence in American culture all conspire to keep women from reporting these incidents. Once they do, few programs have someone like Ho Tang on staff who can mediate the cultural and linguistic maze of the American system. So the opportunity to work with these women in ways that strengthen their sense of who they are, and place value on the skills they bring to our country and our communities, and to honor their experiences easily fits into cultural sustainability work. So after our lunch conversation in May of 2001, Ho Tang invited 10 women from diverse backgrounds to her home to discuss ways they might work together to better address their needs. She invited me to attend and to talk about our grant programs. As we sat in her backyard sipping cool lemonade, I asked the women, what are some of the most important art forms you have brought with you to this country? Unanimously, do you have an idea what they said?
Cooking.
Huh?
Cooking.
Cooking! Our food, they said. Now, 2 things struck me about this response. First, that they understood their food to be an art form. And second, that they all agreed it was one of the most important aspects of their culture. Now, let me interject here that to say that Ho Tang and I just offered a Story Circle workshop for attendees at the 4th World Conference of Women Shelters in Taiwan a few weeks ago. And I asked that room the same question and was pleasantly surprised to receive the same answer 18 years later, and now you have confirmed it. And I would like to acknowledge that Ho Tang Nguyen is with me. in the room. You might be able to see who she is. She's my dear friend and my collaborator on all of this work. And we were together in Taiwan, and so she's just joined me to come here this week. So among the women in Hotang's backyard that day, this immediately triggered the sharing of all kinds of stories about food, and someone said we should do a cookbook. So for about 6 months, we collected more than 100 recipes from refugee and immigrant women and compiled them into a cookbook. The resulting publication, however, is not just a cookbook. Many recipes include a story from the contributor about the meaning of the recipe in her life. The stories highlight the traditions, artistic practices, rituals, or customs surrounding the preparation and presentation, as well as the growing of food and dishes. Some recipes are prepared solely for the celebration of a birthday and have accompanying songs and surprises to delight the recipient. Some are only prepared by men. Readers discover that egg rolls are made in at least 6 different Asian cultures and have specific ingredients that distinguish them from each other. I learned that most Uzbeki women know at least 5 or 6 different ways to prepare pilaf, and that many pilafs are only prepared on special holidays. Mrs. Galperino's wedding pilaf, handed down from mother to daughter for several generations, for instance, includes ingredients that have special meaning for the bride and groom. Now, as folklorists, we understand the importance of food traditions in our communities. As advocates for cultural equity and community self-esteem, we find value in making these stories more publicly known, to break down the barriers created by a fear of the unknown, and food is a great way to do that, as we know. We launched the cookbook at a public luncheon where the women not only prepared and shared their food, but many were encouraged to stand up at the microphone and say a few words about their food, their culture, or their experiences. This was Hotang's way of fostering confidence and leadership among the women. Within a year, we had created a nonprofit organization called PAIRWIN, the Pennsylvania Immigrant and Refugee Women's Network. The mission of PAIRWIN is to honor and enhance the lives of refugee and immigrant women and to empower them to live to their fullest potential. PAIRWIN is committed to, quote, celebrating the rich cultural heritage of our communities while honoring our differences and similarities. And I love this quote, by teaching ourselves to value and understand our own cultures, we learn the most important lessons of leadership, self-esteem, tolerance, and collaboration, end quote. Not all of PAIRWIN's members came out of the domestic violence program, nor has domestic violence continued to be a prominent topic of conversation in the group. Rather, these women saw a need for all newly arriving women to gain the skills and self-confidence required for a successful transition to a new life. The support and impact for victims of domestic violence is understood among the women, and each woman has become a role model for the others in different ways according to her abilities and resources. Today, its members are women from all over the world who have made Pennsylvania their home. With Hotang at the helm, my role has been as a board advisor, though I have been cajoled to write grants, MC portions of their public events, drive members to meetings, pick up supplies, develop and manage programs, and even direct the Readers Theater. Obviously, it's very hard to say no to Hotang. But this is also an important way for folklorists to work. If we are truly hoping to make a difference in the communities that matter to us, we have to be willing to dig in where needed. PAIRWIN now has a board of directors composed of refugee and immigrant women. It took 18 years of volunteer work, but it now has its own office with paid staff, an archive, a kitchen, and meeting space. They have developed successful grant writing skills within the group, produced 19 annual public luncheons to showcase their foodways, and launched the Story Circle Project to collect and share their personal narratives. Those narratives have formed the basis of an exhibition, a short film, and 2 theater projects. Building on the success of the food stories, the women began meeting regularly for what we called story circles. The more stories we shared, the more eager we became to share those stories broadly, to find ways to change public opinion about their contributions to our community. So we created the Story Project. With funding from the state's local history grant program, we identified almost 30 women with a diverse range of experiences, histories, and cultures to participate. From the Bahamas to Vietnam, the final group of participants reflects diverse cultures, ages, social class, occupations, and religions. We developed an interview protocol focusing on the role of women in community life and the changing roles of women in diaspora. My original plan was to train some of the women to do the interviews, but they ended up wanting me to do that. So I did, and even though that wasn't my original plan, it actually offered some good continuity that we might not have had otherwise. The monthly story circles have given these women the opportunity to practice their English and share common experiences. They vary in attendance from 3 to 18, but each month the women are fully engaged in hearing each other's stories. And of course, there's always food. The format is simple. We pick a topic for the month and simply throw out a question. In the beginning, I facilitated these conversations, but the women have taken over the process and made it their own. They are eager to talk, finding more in common than they expected. It has been inspiring to watch as one story begets another in this circle of women drawing closer together in friendship and understanding. As Giovanna Del Negro writes in Looking Through My Mother's Eyes about the sharing of stories among her mother's Italian immigrant friends, quote, in the span of several hours, over coffee, amaretto cookies, and liqueur, the kitchen was transformed into a dramatic stage where issues of motherhood, work, immigration, and marriage were examined through stories. The simple act of talking revealed a complex tapestry of meanings, end quote. In our case, the simple act of talking was creating a sense of belonging many of the women had not experienced in a long time. With their permission, we recorded and transcribed the interviews and story circles. Eventually, we brought in an exhibit curator, a filmmaker, and a theater educator to one of the story circles. They each had read some of the transcriptions and offered recommendations about how the stories might best be presented in their respective media, exhibitions, theater, and film. I thought we would choose one. I would write the grants to fund it, and that would be our big project. But these tenacious women wanted to do all three, so we did. They have become intertwined into a multi-year project. So the heart of the exhibition, entitled Our Voices, Stories of Immigrant and Refugee Women, combined beautiful black and white portrait photographs with short stories chosen by the women from among several excerpted from their interviews. Let me tell you a little bit about our process, because I think it is in the process, as Tom talked about earlier, rather than the product, that we were able to build ownership, a sense of belonging, and individual self-esteem. Using the method of reciprocal ethnography, we involve the women in reading, editing, and shaping any of the final products, such as exhibition labels and theater scripts. First, the women discussed a range of themes that they thought would be relevant to include in the exhibit. These included humor, especially stories about language and confusing behavior patterns, getting used to the way that Americans do things, or acculturation, moments of personal transformation, courage to overcome incredible barriers in order to escape terror, motherhood, in particular, having babies without the usual extended family to help out, and later becoming invisible in their children's lives, and finally, the act of leaving everything behind. Once we had all the transcriptions, I went through every interview and, pulled out several stories from each that might connect or illustrate to one or more of these themes. I shared these with each woman so she had the chance to approve, refine, reject, or find a different story. We then created a small group of non-immigrant women and asked them to read the stories and give us feedback on those that stood out for them, that told an unexpected story or made a powerful connection for them. This allowed us to pare the stories down to about 3 for each woman. We then pulled together a final selection of stories we thought would most broadly and inclusively reflect the themes they had identified. Again, each woman had another opportunity to fine-tune or reject the story and pick another one. In the meantime, Ho-Tang and I went to meet with the chief of exhibits at the State Museum to argue for them to host the exhibition. When we walked out of her office with an opening date on our calendars, Ho-Tang was noticeably elevated. Tears glistened in her eyes, and I was a little worried. But she explained, "I had to leave my country because I no longer felt safe or respected. And here I am in a new country where the official state museum is willing to put my story on their wall for all Pennsylvanians to see." End quote. That moment still makes me teary, thinking about how our work can have a significant impact on a person's life. So co-curated by this unlikely group of women, the exhibit seeks to put a face on these newcomers. To that end, we also created a case filled with treasured artifacts. Among other things, the case held a doll brought by a child, a carved prayer given as a gift by a parent to a daughter as she was leaving, and a handful of soil from one woman's backyard. The circle of chairs, each one hand-painted by the women with motifs and colors that she selected, symbolizes this circle of women who have become a community beyond their own ethnic or cultural affiliations. And during the run of the exhibit, we held public story circles. Whoops, yes. Which expanded the circle of participating women and increased the impact of the exhibition. One person wrote in our guest book, "This exhibition has given me a new understanding of my mother's life and the experiences that made her who she is today." A 12-foot-long, nearly life-size group photograph reflects the sense of community that this process has fostered. Finally, as part of the exhibition, we created an 8-minute film which documented an afternoon at the museum with 12 women painting wooden kitchen chairs that replicated the story circle concept in the exhibit. This brought their real voices into the room, especially when they couldn't be there themselves, and I'm hoping to share this film with you in a few minutes. Alexandra Salazar writes about her own exhibit collaboration with the Cambodian community, quote, "As a result of placing survivor narratives at the center of the exhibit's overall design, and by providing the powerful tools of visual narrative, the exhibit became a medium through which survivors could gain control over traumatic memories that can otherwise be disjunctive, relentless, and disruptive in everyday life." Our exhibit, which opened at the State Museum on September 11th, a date whose significance was not lost on these women, welcomed over 750 people in attendance. The women brought food. We had performances. We did an opening ceremony that connected everyone to each other. And we celebrated the lives and experiences of women who often go unnoticed and more often feel invisible. The next phase of the project was the theater piece. Entitled Story Circle, Coming to America in the 21st Century, the play took 5 of those stories and dramatized them in a 1-hour performance. I especially remember our first conversation about doing a theater production. The artistic director suggested that she could develop their stories into a script, and she would work with local actors to perform it. At first, the women liked this idea. None of them is an actor, after all. They were feeling shy about the idea of actual performing on stage. However, the more they talked, they realized they did not want anyone else telling their story. So our theater piece became very real. In collaboration with the theater educator, they met for weekly diction and improvisation workshops and worked together to write the final script based on their stories. The piece recreates the story circle setting as if they are sitting around a table telling stories. As the stories unfold, images and objects float in the lighting to make the stories tangible. The women used mime, freeze frame, imagery, and monologues to convey their stories. Some women also learned sound, lighting, and stage management so they could be part of the process without being on stage. And this moment in the play was always particularly poignant to hear these women say the very words said to them, "Go back to your country, foreigner." To have them actually be saying that was really powerful. We staged the play just 6 months later at a local community theater as part of their celebration of women playwrights. It was sold out every night, and we offered talkback sessions afterwards to engage the audience in conversations with the actors. The play was so successful that we restaged it in the auditorium at the State Museum during the run of the exhibition. And this image depicts the final scene with a poem that was written by and recited by one of the participants. This work is about much more than the exhibit or the play. It is about the process of storytelling to understand one's own experience by seeing it in the context of understanding others. It is about translating personal narratives into tools for social change. The project has provided a safe place for these women to grapple with ways to present their feelings. They understand the challenges of expressing important ideas in a second language and often help each other find the right words. The story circles have created an almost sacred space where these women who have to hold back in all other aspects of their lives can say what is on their minds because there is someone there who understands, someone who shares the experience. One of the most amazing aspects of this work has been to see these women learn that whether they come from the Philippines, Russia, or Uganda, they have all had similar experiences. Whether refugees or immigrants, they have mourned their losses together, laughed at their mistakes, and shared ideas for dealing with insensitive attitudes in others. They have created new traditions and a new sense of community. In fact, they have said that the Peruvian community is even more important to them than their own national or ethnic community sometimes. All of these programs are drawn from ethnographic listening, a process that gives authority to these women's experiences, reminds them of their strength, and helps reestablish self-esteem. These are often the untold stories of migration and exodus, powerful stories of determination, change, survival, and adaptation. During a planning meeting, one woman helped me understand when she said, "This project is making me feel important for the first time since arriving in the U.S. 2 years ago." The daughter of another woman told us that this play saved my mother's life at a time when she was struggling every day just to get out of bed. As issues arise within the group, we return again and again to their personal narratives for stories that might help to change people's attitudes towards newcomers in their neighborhoods, churches, and workplaces. We often include talkback sessions and public story circles to give audience members an opportunity to reflect on how the stories have impacted them. During one of those talkback sessions, a participant bravely shared this statement: "I always thought I was fairly open-minded, but this play has made me realize the subtle ways that I still carry prejudices. It has also given me strategies for facing those prejudices and trying to make some personal changes." In my work with Peruvian over the past 19 years, I have taken my bearings from individual conversations and group story circles to best understand the broader contemporary experiences or situations of refugee and immigrant women. Well-being and personal dignity have always risen above the horizon as beacons, guiding me, the ethnographer, safely into harbors of responsibility. Perhaps even, as David Westbrook says in Navigators of the Contemporary, to influence the exercise of power, or at least better inform it. One of our more recent projects has been a reader's theater called Magnificent Healing. Different women participate each time we perform it, sharing stories about their heartbreaking and sometimes hilarious conflicts with the American healthcare system. We have performed this play for healthcare providers, students in medical school, and health insurance companies. And each time we make small inroads that have the potential to impact perceptions and policies. If we had time, I would love to read like just one of the first scenes of the play for you, but we don't. This project has exemplified the shifting role of the ethnographer from one of documentarian and arts advocate to one of community activist. It has been about trying to use my skills and the resources I have to make a difference in the lives of others. Redefining my work by better understanding their needs, taking bearings from their stories. Through narratives of migration, motherhood, courage, and food, I have seen the transformative power of story to create agency and resilience among refugee and immigrant women. These stories and more illustrate our responsibility as cultural advocates to help build and foster community self-esteem and well-being. Borrowing from Robert Cantwell's notion of cultural inalienable rights, we understand sustainability in our MA program to be about creating the conditions in which cultures can thrive. Exhibitions, theater productions, and films grounded in narratives and traditions of our communities are spaces where we create an opportunity for conversations to happen, conversations that break down our fear of the unknown and open up opportunities for real understanding. There is a deeply interwoven connection between what happens at the local level and the long-term survival of the planet, both culturally and environmentally. If we cannot create the conditions for cultures to thrive at the local level, we cannot hope to thrive as a global community. Providing the opportunity for communities to be heard, seen, embraced, and included is what Rory Turner calls radical critical empathy. To sustain, after all, is to be held from underneath. Turner continues, we must be able to have empathy, not as a gesture of condescending appreciation, but as a lived experience. If we are to sustain, we must hold this from below. As folklorists, this is our work. By paying attention to culture and honoring its critical role in our sense of self, we create the conditions for cultures to thrive. Thank you. So now I want to play this. How do I get out of here? Go to here and go to here.
Right there, and then the full screen.
Which one? This one?
At the hospital, one day an old lady asked me where I was from. I told her that I was from Africa, and she asked me if we still live on the trees.
You think she's deliberately trying to hurt your feelings, or do you think she really didn't know?
No, she didn't know.
She really didn't know. They don't know, but they don't know how to act. They don't know how to act.
The exhibit is entitled Our Voices, which is about really giving voice to refugee and immigrant women who settled in central Pennsylvania so that people who don't know these women or who don't take the time to know them will hear a little bit about those stories. The idea with the chairs came because one of the ways that we've been working with the women is bringing them together in story circles, and we thought that it would be so wonderful to try to replicate.
What do I do here?
Feeling
Skip.
in the museum.
The problem presented here in doing it short is First of all, it's a very strange thing to paint. The biggest problem is what to include and what to leave out.
Here is Chairman Mao with George Washington. Salmon from Canada.
This rock is going to be in the exhibit, and this is the beach where we found this rock. It goes to the beach where we go to on the weekend.
Trinidad in the Caribbean. So where I grew up was on the plains where there were sugarcane fields growing, but you would see mountains, the northern range from the village. So that's what I'm trying to represent here.
The Angkor Wat is in Cambodia. It's a very popular tourist attraction. Hopefully it'll come out as we would, picture it.
It's really pretty typical to be nervous about painting. So I tried to break it down into a simple form. So we did some exercises that involved drawing things with just triangles, circles, and squares. And I hope that that was a confidence builder. And we also talked about symbolism and how that is a quick form of communication. We talked about colors and how you grow up in the midst of certain colors.
I'm not really good at drawing, so I always draw this flower. And then I start making a heart and then turn it into a I'm putting this in there.
I'm painting this red, white, and blue. Red is for China, white is for Canada, where I grew up, and blue is for the U.S.
So each design has a meaning. Girls were not allowed to date boys, but when they fell in love, this would be their way of expressing their emotions. This is a common one that I see on the Kurdish rock, so I wanted to make that. So I work on it a little bit more.
Well, work on also, and this is some traditional dishes. It's part of the bowl, so it's here in.
I remember growing up in Eden, my mom would make a specialty on how they eat a soup from a wooden bowl, which is designed just like that, with a spoon, and drink the juice from the cup, I don't know, I guess that's what the Russian tradition they used to carve every time we would, and there's always gold. Russian churches, Russian dishes, it's all gold, so we introduce gold in the design.
These are snowflakes. Birch tree.
It's a lion standing on a sword, showing how strong things are.
Well, what they've done for the most part is taken memories of where they grew up. Some of them are telling stories. Like Sarla is telling a story about coming from India to America, from going from one shore to the other shore.
So on this one, I will be when I came as a bride to US. So I'm trying to make the concept that is West. It's like around the universe, we are all born.
Oh, yeah, my friend, she's Ecuadorian, but she's from another section from Ecuador. She's from the mountains, and I'm from the coast. So she was planning to, take the mountains and all that, but she came with a purple shirt that I needed. And I said, Bill, that's exactly what I need to make. I said, yeah, take off that shirt. So she gave it to me, and I gave her my shirt. So now I'm painting it.
The design I have here is the rice field and the bamboo and a mountain. In the back of the chair is a ocean. I'm seriously to tell you, I was thinking in my completely different thing.
You're thinking of something completely different.
Yeah, I did. When you remember when I did the chair?
So a lot of working with people doing art is getting them calmed down, because people are very intimidated by it. I hear people like Ho Chang, who left Vietnam on this little boat during bombing and a war, is intimidated by paint.
Yes, are you happy with it?
Yes, I am. I'm a little frustrated in the morning, but now I am. I'm done.
This is a serious design, and this is like a kid-like. You might wonder why I have the two there. Maybe that's because I can move from one to the other easily. I could deal with serious stuff with, kind of like a design that makes you think versus a design that makes you smile and then be a child.
Wasn't that your husbands?
If I don't think my green shoe, this is a mess up.
We don't have time to be together like this for many, many hours. This is fun.
I hope that they go through the whole exhibit and have chance to sit on this chair that we try to paint and we try to tell our story in the way that they can go through our book, our album book, and they can read our story there and learn from us, learn different culture. And next time when you have your neighbor or someone in your co-worker at work is different than you, think about that, how the immigrant and refugee come to this country and how much they contribute to this country.
I would like them to read, actually not only my story, everybody's stories, and I would like them to read the stories, look at the pictures, and look at the paintings, and kind of understand all the agony and the difficulty we all went through to come here, and also to be able to stay here, and the acculturation process we had to go through, and the difficulties we had to face, and that we made it.
If you noticed that we didn't put last names in the credits, we had several people involved in the project that were very worried for their lives or the lives of their families back home. And so even in the exhibit itself, we didn't use last names so that it couldn't accidentally somehow get back to families in their countries that they had had to escape. So that's just one thing. And most of the women in this group self-selected as coming to the museum to paint those chairs, but obviously it's a much bigger group. So questions, comments?
Thank you very much. I think yes, time for questions and comments. Go on, Claire, I knew it.
I've got a million questions. I completely want to do that whole project, but my practical question is, do you run story circle training that I could come with?
Yes. In fact, the workshop that Ho-Tang and I were doing in Taiwan was a story circle training for people who work in women's shelters so that they could actually use that process in, that's exactly what we do. So we would, Ho-Tang and I would love to, do something like that, yes. If you want, yeah.
Okay, there's one signed up.
Yep, all right. Anybody else? We'll come back. Yeah.
No, I was going to say no.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Simon.
Another comment or question?
Claire.
Why chairs specifically? I mean, because of the story circle?
Yeah.
Or have you done something similar with other things, like suitcases, perhaps?
That's an interesting question. The chairs were so that we could replicate the idea of a story circle, and the museum actually made found 12 chairs that were exactly identical. I love Sasha's comment in there about, we all started with the exact same thing and they're all different. They're all unique. So I love that she, as a 11-year-old, got that, in that process during the day. But yeah, I think, we haven't done suitcases. Ho-Tang, what other things have we done? We've done quilts. We've done quilt squares, and then created one large quilt out of everybody's individual quilt squares. What other things? Stools. I think we did stools once.
We did two quilts, really.
Mm-hmm.
retreat, a part of woman retreat is for the artists come in to tell them, ask them, teach them how to do jewelry. We make jewelry and we sell jewelry to the people. And just little things to earn some money for the woman, show them. And they, we did crochet.
Yeah, we did. There's a very large, more recently arrived community of Nepali refugees in the area, and knitting and crocheting is a big thing that they do. So we had several knitting circles with them, sewing circles and knitting circles where they made things, and then we found opportunities for them to sell. I mean, there's so much more that we've done than what I was able to.
And actually right now we have, actually tomorrow in the state, the first we launching a global market, which whoever wants to make food, they can make food and sell it and get the money for themselves. Just like all the food out of it, of a large room like this, and we just have them come and just do that. And some jewelry makers, they make jewelry, they bring it in, and clothes, whatever they make, they really sell. And they really, the first time we tried out, just let the people see, they really like it, and now look like a whole bunch of people applied and register to come to be a vendor, and because our office is underneath of the organization, really large. They have like 100 employees, and then we have another building around, and we advertise it out, and look like we'll be really busy tomorrow for lunch from 11 to 1, and the people can come in, and just like the global market, we call that global market. And another way to help the woman to earn some money.
Hotang, you want to come up here? Come on up here.
Yes.
I've got two questions if that's okay. One for Amy, one for Hotang, if that's okay with you. The first question for Amy is, now I know that some of this was done as sort of an independent, as part of your NGO before you were associated with Goucher possibly, but have you encountered difficulty within what we call the academy with sort of convincing them that this is relevant work for scholars, and that scholars need not only look at books and stay in libraries like this, but can actually go out and work with the community? And if so, how did you convince them that it is actually relevant?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the college where I teach and work is has a reputation of being a social justice focused campus for many, many years. And they're the first college in the country to require international study abroad for all students. And they have a community-based learning program that is very extensive and works with across many of the centers. We don't have majors and departments anymore. We have centers that are interdisciplinary and collaborative. Add to that the fact that our program is really about preparing people to do professional work in communities, and all of our faculty are practitioners. So all of those, kind of create a landscape for this kind of work to be very welcomed. So they've been very excited. We've continued to do some of the readers' theaters, and they're always asking me to make sure that I'm writing stuff about it so they can post it in all the social media and stuff like that. So that seems, I think that they're really open to it.
We learn a lot from Amy. We learn a lot from Amy.
Well, the feeling is way mutual. I've obviously learned way more from you than you have from me. But anyway, I did teach grant writing skills to you guys. And I'm so proud because how much is that grant you guys got?
We got a lot. I don't know.
What was the one from
OVW grant that we got $300,000 for 2 years. And we have an office. That's where you saw the I'm cutting the ribbon, and everybody's so happy. I'm just like,
Yeah, finally.
Yeah, that's from that. And then we have senior program. We have young leadership, youth leadership program. We have ESL class, English as a second language. We have so many things going on. We have life coaching. We have seven women from different countries. When we send them to the class and take how to learn to do life coaching, and they come back and they help in their own community in our office, to do it. And it's wonderful, and people keep asking for that, and hopefully we can continue doing that too. And now we have a global marketplace, and then we have our office and a lot of organizations, just like us before. We have no office, and we work from home or meeting at the coffee shop, and sometimes it's not really safe because, a lot of women come in and they want us, we want confidentiality, and that's a little hard. Now we have an office, and we try to helping other obligations, but they don't have office, they can use our office to do whatever they need to do, and we work out well. We just starting out a little bit too. My goal and my vision is have a center for all the organization can be part of it, but they have office there, and the art and one-stop shop. The resource that we need the resource there. Our women have a hard time to find a resource, and that's why I quit my job and create this organization to just be a bridge to get the resource to the women. With my husband's help. Without your husband, without your family's support, you cannot do it. You cannot do that alone, and I know that because I went home one day. I went to do a keynote speaker one time about human trafficking at the college, and this was a beautiful day. I came home. I went to do the speaking, and I came home. I talked to my husband, and I said, I have something to talk to you about. And he said, you can tell me now. I said, no, I want to after dinner. What I'm going to talk to you about. But he knows me so well. He asked me, he said, you're planning to quit your job. And I said, well, if you let me do it, can you support me what I'm doing? And I will. And he knew me so well, and he said, yes, I will support you. And Monday I came into the office and I wrote a letter and I said, bye, 2 weeks later. And I thought I involved full-time on the payroll.
Yeah, and I think the very, very early desire to create services for women that really look at the whole woman and not just a particular issue or problem is exactly what Parowan does now. So it's fabulous that they've been able to achieve that, achieve that goal and that mission. So.
But you probably did answer quite a bit of it. It's rather awkward as I move the camera back to you. But obviously you'd already done and accomplished quite a bit on your own. I'm just wondering what your reaction was when Amy came to you 19 years ago and sort of described her project. How did you react to that, and how did you sort of approach it?
I am eager to learn and learn. That time I was young. And I just wanted to create this organization so bad, and I did not know who's out there would be supporting me and helping me. I was still working a full-time job. And when Amy came and talked to me, and we just clicked, we went to the Thai place for lunch, and we just clicked, she talked to me, because, I am very protected, the immigrant and refugee woman. And if anybody come and talk to me or, about get involved, or talk to other women get involved, my what can I say?
Hackles.
My
I think the word you're looking. Oh, your antenna. Okay.
Sure that people not get to be
using us for their good, whatever they need. And it's happened to us too, after Emmy helping the nurse, and then it's happened to our woman, and I get really frustrated and I have to make a call. But with Emmy, she's so sincere, and she's just like, I don't know, that day I had to talk to her, and then we just clicked, and we just say, okay, let's work together. And we start, you know, with the, I started inviting her to come to the first story circle that we have, and we just sit there and talk, and she already told you what we did, and we started about the food, and we just said, okay, let's do the cookbook. We got a cookbook. We got $10,000, we had $2,000 for that cookbook. Don't funded $2,000, and we make the cookbook. It's just like, looking back like how many years ago, 18 years ago, that cookbook is good, it's nice to see it, and it's momentum there, because every recipe, they have a story why they want to put that recipe in cookbook. But the cookbook is so cheesy, so cheap. Seriously, right now we're ready to do another cookbook, but we have to do better ways. Yeah. But you know, like I said before, Emmy, I learned a lot from Emmy, and in vice versa, Emmy know a lot about us now too. And all the women in our group love her, love Emmy. And every time we do something, we always get her see our advisor, and we always ask her, okay, this program is coming, what do you think? How can we do better? Because, you know, we just cannot just sing program and sing things all the time. We have to do better and thinking what we do and what the woman needs, because 18 years ago, the woman needs different way. Now, with their kids, with their children older, and they think they need a different way. The newcomers still have struggling with English as a second language, the job, the drive a car, or whatever they need, the social services, and children go to school. But we have like double more now with elderly. We have how to take care of them. You know, how to deal with all those things, because the elderly right now in that area, from 10 to 3, they home alone. They don't know anybody. And we have the senior program now. We from 10 to 3, we get them together. We play bingo. We take them, took them out to different places. We ask them to tell the story. We have a little story circle with them, tell the story, and we using that as our let the children know. You know, it's getting good. Good.
They've totally taken it and run with it. It's fabulous.
Right, well, I think we'll finish up with the formal bit, but please, speaking of foodways, join us for some Scottish foodways in the back there. We have smoked salmon and some interesting cheeses from Scotland, and lovely oatcakes from Port Soy, that book-building place that I mentioned. So please join us and talk with each other and learn more about each other, maybe tell each other a narrative or a story of some kind. So please join us over there, tea and coffee and food. So thanks very much to our speaker and to Buchan as well.
Thank you.
At the World Women's Shelter Conference, and we are planning to go further. It's not just in Taiwan only, and there's not only one. We are working right now to go to, in the United States, we want to go to 50-some states.
Are we?
Yeah.
If you all want to learn how to do the story circle, let us know.
So sign up for our mailing list and take the little catalog of public events with you. But do come join us for something to eat. We have a lot of food to get through. So.
And on the 23rd of January, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. So please come to the Elphinstone Institute, ground floor of the McCormick building. Come into the library, see our members of staff and our students, and get to know us a bit better.